Marion Street.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, the Minister who has just resumed her seat is not wrong. This bill, or now collection of bills, before the House for third reading are part of a grand plan. Be in no doubt that this government does have a plan for the environment and for all of those pieces of legislation which impede, in their view, economic development and so must be undermined or cut away or diluted or diffused in some way. So, Mr Speaker, what we have seen is this bill take its place alongside reforms of the Local Government Act, for example, which strips local government responsibilities back basically to roads, rubbish and rates, and takes away their responsibility to deal with social and economic and cultural and environmental well-being in their communities. That is not too distant from this bill, the Resource Management Reform Bill, in its three composite parts, Mr Speaker, because all of these things are of a piece. And in fact, I commend the government for being so coherent about it. While they've been trying to get one piece of ideology through at a time, there is no doubt they have been working to a plan. And some of the things that they consider to be the stumbling blocks to progress and development in our country are some of the things that New Zealanders hold most dear. And what we see in this piece of legislation is a movement that builds on the previous amendments to which the Minister referred in her speech and will be followed by an additional piece of legislation, again to which the Minister referred in her speech, which we might expect to see in the House in October of this year. Mr Speaker, all of these things, piece by piece, little by little, are having a cumulative effect on our environmental protections and on the things that New Zealanders hold dear. Mr Speaker, I want to begin the main part of my rebuttal of this bill by going back to the kind of I want to say urban mythology, but it's also rural mythology on which the presumptions of this government in changing the Resource Management Act have been based. There is a mythology out there, and the Minister uses it quite readily when it suits her, that it is very hard to get anything done under the Resource Management Act. It's really prohibitively ponderous, expensive and slow. And the example that she uses frequently is an example of somebody building a deck on their house. And that is held up as one of the main blocks to progress. That's not what this government is about. It's not about the deck on the house. It's about very substantial economic development, whether it's construction or extraction or any other kind of industry, that in their view should not be impeded by the intrinsic the inherent worth of the environment, the physical environment that we so enjoy. Mr Speaker, it's as if the government hasn't quite worked out that our environment in New Zealand is our economy. The environment is the economy. It doesn't matter which way you slice and dice it. Our environment is our economic well-being. It doesn't matter whether it's just vegetables grown in gardens or it's comprehensive plans for development of renewable energies. These things contribute to our economic and our social well-being. But the mythology that this is based on, Mr Speaker, I just want to draw out some of the telling facts from the Minister's own ministry are not often referred to in the Minister's discussion or government members opposite discussion of the bill and these changes to it. They ignore the fact that under the RMA in 2010 and 2011, 36,154 resource consent applications were processed through to a decision. 0.56%, that is 203, of resource consent applications were declined. So 0.5%, Mr. Speaker. 4%, 1,414 of resource consent applications were publicly notified, allowing third parties to comment on them. 4% were publicly notified, which meant that people could make comment on them. 2%, 849 of resource consent applications were notified to affected parties only for their comments. 2% of resource consent applications were notified to affected parties only for their comments. 1%, that is 357, of resource consent decisions were appealed. Local authority officers acting under delegated authority made 91% of decisions on resource consent applications, and 95% of resource consent applications were processed on time, were processed within the 20 working days that the Resource Management Act allowed. Mr. Speaker, these are the facts that the Ministry for the Environment itself declares are the facts around the application of the Resource Management Act. So why is there the perpetuation of this mythology that the RMA gets in the way of development? Yes, there are cases. The supermarket on the North Shore, certainly a case in point, and I'm pleased that that has been resolved satisfactorily. But that's not the RMA's fault, actually. There were some malcontents on both sides of that argument who were keen to see the matter drawn out, or certainly on one side of the argument that were keen to see that, project drawn out. Mr. Speaker, it seems to me that while there may be room to improve and streamline the Resource Management Act, and we have no objection to improvements to the process, a wholesale staged implementation of a plan against the Resource Management Act is not justified. There is no justification, and this will become even more obvious when the Minister's third attempt at undermining the RMA comes to this House later this year. Mr. Speaker, this is all of a part. This is all of a pattern. And the thing that the national government cannot tolerate is that New Zealanders have come to appreciate, even more than they have previously, the intrinsic and amenity values of our environment. And it is not satisfactory now to put a tunnel through from Dart River to Milford, and so the Minister chose not to. The basis on which the Minister of Conservation chose not to, the basis on which the Minister for the Environment proceeds with these wholesale onslaughts on the RMA is not proven, is not demonstrated, and is simply based on ideology over environmental protection. Mr. Speaker, this will be another weakening of our environmental protections in New Zealand. People are aware now of what the government is doing and its intentions with the Resource Management Act. Turning it into an economic development act is not what most New Zealanders want to have happen. The government needs to think, if it's committed only to jobs, it needs to think of the jobs that can be created in clean technology and ways that preserve and enhance our environment rather than constantly running over it and asphalting it. Mr. Speaker, this is not is not a piece of legislation that is going to protect our environment and enhance it.
Nicky Wagner.
Mr. Speaker, the purpose